prior to the E-League major qualifier back in December, I made a video, I'll put it up there, which was about using the Swiss system, my thoughts on it, contrasting it against other systems. And at the time, we'd only really seen it used for 2 tournaments in total. We'd seen it used for the ESL1 Cologne 2016 qualifier, and we'd seen it used at ESL1 New York. But ESL1 New York, due to only having 8 teams, actually violated some of the general rules that you use for the Swiss system, like teams playing each other more than once in the group, teams with different records playing each other. Go and have a look. Fnatic played Team Liquid twice, and once where Fnatic and Team Liquid had different records. So we really only had 1 tournament to go off, and because it wasn't the best teams in the world, it was just the qualifier for ESL1 Cologne, the major, it was still hard to see how playing out the problems actually would become glaring, or what the real flaws were. Now that we've had it at the major and the major qualifier, I think we've really got a sense on it, and now I feel like I have a better grasp on what I don't like about the system, rather than just speculating. Now, obviously it goes out saying no system is perfect, but that does not mean you can draw a false equivalency between all systems and make out like just because each system has flaws, they're all equally flawed. No, the point is to find the system that is the least flawed, or is as close to it as possible. So, in the other systems you can use for group stages or initial stages. So the GSL style system, one of my favorites, essentially double elimination bracket inside a group. One of the flaws of this system is you can lose 2 best of ones and go out of the tournament after only playing 2 maps. That can't happen. The minimum maps you can play in Swiss system is 3 maps. Now, sure, you could say yes, but you could do best of 3s the whole way in the group stage. Like, for example, they did at Gfinity Summer Masters 1 in 2015. The problem with that system, though, is it's going to take a lot longer to run, and also it's going to be much harder to schedule because you can't perfectly know how many games you'll have and at what time of the day, because a series could go 3 maps, or it could be a very short 2 maps. Now, if you have the IM Oakland style, large best of 1 round robin group system, which is actually the old school way of doing group stages in Counter-Strike. The problem with this is, yeah, you get to warm up, you get to play multiple games in a day, but you also play a lot of opponents, and as such, results become a bit more randomized. That's why the teams that win the groups of those tournaments famously do not win tournaments, as I outlined in an article actually, that teams that have won the groups of those bigger group stage systems and gotten to skip to the semis have thus far in history never won one of those tournaments, going back into 1.6 when we had that format as well at the IEM World Championships. Now, Swiss systems problems now have become quite apparent. Now, the first and most important one that is a real big problem is if seeding is not done well. Now, if you use no seeding at all, it'll be an absolute train wreck. But the seeding system that Valve used, which is just based on where you finished at the last major, was itself incredibly flawed. Because what we ended up with was situations where we had matches, first round matches and second round matches, massively affected by this, that made the tournament unfair to some degree. So first and foremost, in the first round, there are matches that never should have been possible, and with real seeding would never have been. No one would have ranked these teams far enough apart that they would have met at that point in the tournament. The problem is, people don't seem to understand it. It's not just that the first round is fucked up, it's that when the first round is fucked up, it means that in the second round, when you randomly draw who's going to play, obviously it can't be the same teams that played before, it couldn't be anyway, but you know what I mean, going forwards as you go through each round, that in itself, that error is going to carry on into the second round to a lesser degree, but it's going to still be present, and it's only going to be kind of error corrected later in the tournament. So the error correcting aspect of the Swiss system, where winners play winners and losers play losers, which I like, is sort of delayed around by bad seeding initially. So first round matchups, let's think of 2 of them off the top of our head. Optic should never have been playing Virtus Pro. That should never have been possible in any sense. If you get any CS expert in the world before the major and ask them to rank 1 to 16 the teams, no one will ever have Optic and VP at positions where they will be able to play each other in the first round. It would never have happened. So that was a massive flaw right there. Then you got 2 teams that are both much worse than Optic and VP that got to play each other as well. Envious got to play Team Liquid. In what universe could Envious and Team Liquid play each other? Most people probably would have Envious, barely in the top part. Where would Team Liquid be? They'd be right near the bottom of the thing. The idea that they could play in the first round, a first round which also includes Optic VP, is absolutely laughable. That should never have been possible. Now, when you go to the second round, that does fuck up some of the matchups, depending on who wins and loses. But with that said, I will say this. People who looked at Optic versus Astralis and said, right, this is unfair. They had to play VP. Now they have to play Astralis. This shows how fucked the seeding system is. No, it only shows how fucked the first round of the seeding system is. Because actually, Optic should never have played Virtus Pro. That is absolutely correct. In my opinion, not even debatable. Now, should Astralis have been able to play Optic? That's it. What's entirely fair, because once you've done the seeding in the first round, you don't see the second round. At that point, it is randomly drawn based on who's available. Now, at that point, it's all the losers playing each other. So the problem is, who did Astralis play to be able to then get in a position to play Optic and be by being a loser? They played Godsent. Now, Astralis playing Godsent was actually perfectly fine. That would have been reasonable within the seeding system. Wouldn't have been totally ridiculous. Also, Astralis were a massive favourite to win that and should in fact have won that game and didn't. So you can't blame the seeding system of the Swiss system for Astralis playing Optic. You can blame Astralis for that. That's essentially all you can blame. It's Astralis' fault that they lost it. That's it. So, I mean, you could go the other one and say it's unfair for Astralis, right? They have to play against Optic. Oh, but it isn't, is it? Because Astralis lost the game. Also, Optic then went on to lose to Godsent later anyway, so I don't really see what the issue is right there. They would have been playing Godsent instead anyhow, which is actually a fairly reasonable matchup. So, you've got to then consider that a big part of the problem with the seeding is not the fault of the tournaments, it's Valve's system. Valve continuing that Legends system, which then leads into how the seeding is done, is what is ruining the first round seeding and making it so flawed. This is why I want to see another tournament, but not like ESL where they only had 8 teams. I want to see a big tournament, like a tier 1 world-class tournament, run Swiss system with 16 teams and seed properly. And we will see from how it plays out how much better that makes the tournament and how we will see fewer flawed matchups overall. I can almost guarantee at this point, but I want to see it proven because then we can go to Valve and show them that as opposed to abstractly trying to describe it to them as I am doing. I mean, I'm giving specific examples, but it's going to be abstract to them if they don't know the teams very well. Another flaw of Swiss system is the way the scheduling works, because first of all, teams that win 3-0 go through too early when you have a long event like the Major. They go through after a couple of days of play. That's a flawed approach because teams who have to play 5 maps are playing way longer. Now, as I mentioned before, in that scenario about the best of ones, teams that skip days and get to have days off, it actually tends to be a flaw for those teams. It's always wrecked the teams in those best of 1 round robins where they got to skip a day and other teams played on that day. I mean, at the Major itself, think of one of the teams that won 3-0. Na'Vi, right? They went out in the round of 8. Now, admittedly, they had to play the best team, but they still went out. They still did not go that far. They got to skip. If anything, they looked worse when they got to the playoffs. There's also the fact that you only play 1 map per day, a best of 1. Now, that's not a lot of Counter-Strike. It's hard to get warmed up on that. As a result, I don't think you're getting the best Counter-Strike. I've always thought the best Counter-Strike nearly always comes in map 2 and map 3 of a series. It's not usually map 1 from my experience. I also think, as such, it can feel like you didn't get to play enough. You didn't really get to show your skills. Then you've got to add in, for these tournaments that we've seen recently, the randomizer element. Now, that's not Swiss System's fault. There is no reason a randomizer has to exist. Again, that's Valve implementing that. So that's actually not a flaw of the Swiss system. The last problem, and it is an issue, is that unfortunately this is one of the only approaches which destroys the possibility to prepare for specific opponents. Because even in the best of 1 round robins like IEM Oakland, at least you know the other 5 teams in your group. You can prepare for those 5 teams and put more prep in for the better teams. You can never know beyond the first round matchup who you will play in the Swiss system. Therefore, you're expected to prepare for 15 teams. You can't do that. You cannot do that vaguely to the same degree you could in GSL or the round robin style system. And it's just not tenable. You're going to have to focus on the best teams. You're going to have to focus in general just on your style and your strengths. I think that's a flaw because I do like when you see a cool upset where you know it's because a team specifically, like when Flipside beat NIP at ESL 1 Cologne in the group stage, they've prepared maps and their approach specifically for that opponent. And they've really put in the time and effort, and it's a very legit upset in that sense. As opposed to the upsets you get in best of 1 or Swiss system, which tend to be more random upsets, or just a good individual performance, or due to the map being randomized onto a map that happens to be good for you when there was a bad one that was the other one available. So there are clear flaws to the Swiss system. I do think it's a good system. I like it in general. I certainly want some tournaments to retain it. Personally, my favorite is still GSL, and I wish it was just best of 3 the whole time in GSL system. But I can certainly see some benefits to using it and going forwards. But if we're going to use it, let's improve the seeding. Let's fix that aspect. Some of the other aspects might just be problems that remain inherent in terms of the scheduling. Obviously, the randomizer can be removed, but definitely we need the seeding to be improved because that will make the first part of the tournament a lot better and therefore a lot more fair and get us the best teams into the playoffs.